do when you burn with a passion? What do you do when you have a dream and you do not know how to make your dream come true? I grew up a total comic book geek. As a kid, my dream was to one day write Batman comics, and then to make dark, serious Batman movies that would show the whole world what the true Batman was like, the guy created in 1939 as a creature of the night stalking criminals from the shadows. But what do you do when you're just a blue-collar kid from New Jersey? I didn't come from money. My dad was a mason. My mom was a bookkeeper. I couldn't buy my way into Hollywood. I had no relatives in Hollywood. I didn't know anybody in Hollywood. How do you get there from here? How do you make your dreams come true? Well, for me, I told you I was a total fanboy. When I was growing up, by the time I graduated high school, I had a comic book collection of over 30,000 comic books dating back to 1936. From the day we moved into our house, my dad never once got his car in the garage. Instead, he built floor-to-ceiling shelves for me around 3 walls of the garage. And when we filled those up, we filled up the center of it all. And out of all those superheroes, for me, there was no question. I loved Batman. Forget Superman, forget the Hulk, forget Spider-Man. It was Batman for me. Why? Because he was the only superhero I knew who had no superpowers. Batman's greatest superpower is his humanity. And I so identified with him as a kid, and I tell you, when I was age 8, in my heart of hearts, I really did believe that if I studied really hard, and if I worked out really hard, and if my dad bought me a cool car, I could be this guy. But how do you get your foot in the door? How do you make it work? My first chance to get my foot in the door came in college. I went to Indiana University. It was, go IU. It was the early 1970s, a time of great experimentation on college campuses. And as a parent, I'm not allowed to tell you any more about that. At that time, College of Arts and Sciences started an experimental curriculum department. If you had an idea for a course that had never been taught before and had the backing of a department on campus, you had the right to appear before a panel of deans and professors, pitch your course, and if they approved, you could teach it on campus for 3 hours of credit. Well, I then sat down and designed what I hoped would be the world's first course on comic books. I went to the folklore department and they backed me on it. I said comic books are an American art form as indigenous to this country as jazz. Comic book superheroes are a modern-day mythology. It's contemporary American folklore. The ancient gods of Greece, Rome, and Egypt still all exist, only today they wear spandex and capes. And so in my Spider-Man t-shirt, with a bundle of comics under my arm, with my hair down to my shoulders, and yes, I was wearing my love beads at the time, thank you. I walk into this room. It was a dark conference room with a big table in it. All the professors sitting around it. I thought I had just walked into the secret sanctum of the Justice League of America. And as I got there, the dean at the end with these little half glasses perched over his nose looked down at me and said, "So you're the fella who wants to teach a course on funny books at my university?" I knew I was in deep shit. I then launched into the first pitch of my career. He lets me speak for maybe 2 minutes and then cuts me off. "Mr. Uslan, come on. I don't buy any of this. I read comic books when I was a kid. All they are cheap entertainment for children. Nothing more, nothing less. I used to read Superman all the time, but give me a break. Mythology, art, I reject your theory." There are moments in time where your life changes. This was it for me. Because I could have picked up my books, turned around, and walked out with my head bowed. Instead, I stood my ground. I said, "Dean, can I ask you 2 questions?" He said, "Ask me anything you want." I said, "Are you familiar with the story of Moses?" He looked at me and said, "Yeah, so?" I said, "Very briefly, could you just summarize for me the story of Moses?" And he folds his arms and he looks at me and he goes, "I don't know what game you're playing here, but I'll play this with you." He said, "The Hebrew people were being persecuted, their firstborn were being slain. A Hebrew couple placed their infant son in a little wicker basket and sent him down the river Nile. There he's discovered by an Egyptian family who raised him as their own son. When he grew up and learned of his real heritage, he became a great hero to his people." I said, "Dean, thank you so much. That's great. You mentioned that you read Superman comics. Do you recall the origin of Superman?" He said, "Well, sure, the planet Krypton was blowing up." A scientist and his wife placed their infant son in a little rocket ship and sent him to Earth. There he's discovered by the Kents, who raise him as their own son. And then he stops, stares at me for what I swear to you was an eternity, and says, "Your course is accredited." Oh my God, I'm now the world's first college professor of comic books. I can't believe I pulled it off. I'm walking back to my apartment off campus, and then suddenly, inside my head, I can hear my mother's voice. She always used to tell me stuff like this: "Michael, you could have the greatest creative ideas in the world, but if you don't market yourself, if you don't market your ideas, no one will ever see these creative wares." I got back to my apartment thinking about that. I was a junior, undergrad. I picked up a phone, I called United Press International in Indianapolis, at that time as big a news syndicate as Associated Press. I got a reporter on the phone and started to scream at this poor man. "What's wrong with you? This is terrible. You're supposed to be the watchdogs of our society. You're not doing your job." He goes, "Calm down, what are you talking about?" I said, "I hear there's a course on comic books being taught at Indiana University. Are you telling me as a taxpayer in this state they're using my money to teach our children comic books? This is outrageous. This has got to be a communist plot to subvert the youth of America," and I slammed down the phone. It took the reporter 3 days to find out if there really was a course, and if so, who was the crazy person teaching it. He interviewed me. An article went out, picked up by every major newspaper in North America, a bunch in Europe, a third of a page long, with pictures, and my phone never stopped ringing. I started doing radio and TV talk shows. I never taught one class that wasn't filled with TV cameras from NBC Nightly News, the CBS Evening News. I had reporters in one class in the front row, Family Weekly, Parade Magazine, Playboy, Penthouse. This story appealed to everybody. 2-3 weeks go by, my phone rings. "Is this Mike Uslan?" "Yeah." "Hiya, Mike, this is Stan Lee from Marvel Comics in New York City." I call this my burning bush moment. For those of you who are uninitiated, Stan is the co-creator of the pantheon of Marvel superheroes. Spider-Man, the Hulk, X-Men, Thor, Avengers, you name it. And he said, "Mike, everywhere I look, I'm seeing you on TV, I'm reading about you in the newspapers, what you're doing is great for the whole comic book industry, how can I help you?" 2 hours later, the president of DC Comics, publishers of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, calls me and says, "We heard you on the radio, we're reading about you in magazines, we'd like to fly you to New York and talk about ways we might be able to work with an innovative young man like you." Okay. I'm now in New York, they offer me a job, I'm working summers at DC Comics. This is a fanboy's wet dream come true. One evening, it's about 6 o'clock, and I hear screaming coming from one of the editor's rooms. It's the editor of a comic book called The Shadow, which some of you may remember. There was an Alec Baldwin movie a few years back. And I went in, I go, "Are you okay?" He goes, "I am not okay." He goes, "I got a big problem. There is a Shadow script due tomorrow on deadline. I don't have a script. I don't even have a story." I said, "I have a story for The Shadow." He said, "You do?" I didn't. But so what? That door opened a little bit and I was sticking my foot in it. He said, "Come in here, sit down." And I started making up a story on the spot. He's desperate. He says, "Look, can you have this on my desk by tomorrow afternoon?" I said, "No problem." He says, "Go do it." The next day, I turn in the script. I'm now a writer for DC Comics. 2 weeks go by. Who's walking down the hall but the famous editor of all the great comic books DC had? Very important guy, very gruff, tough guy, until you got to know him and he was kind of a marshmallow. He sees me coming, he goes, "Hey kid." I said, "Yes, Julie." He said, "I read your Shadow script." I said, "You did?" He goes, "Yeah, it didn't stink." I said, "Whoa, thank you so much. Oh my God, that's great." He said, "How'd you like to take a shot at writing Batman?" I went back to Indiana University and I start writing Batman comics. My dream I had since I was 8 years old came true, and I panicked. because I didn't have a dream. I needed a new dream. And at that moment, I thought back to 8th grade, the night in January when the Batman TV show came on the air. When that show came on, I was simultaneously thrilled and horrified by what I was seeing on TV. I was thrilled, look, the car was cool, it was in color, they spent a lot of money, but I was horrified that the whole world was laughing at Batman. It killed me. And I made my little young Bruce Wayne vow that night, even though my parents were safe in the kitchen. I said, somehow, someday, some way, I would eliminate from the collective consciousness of the world culture 3 little words, pow, zap, and wham. It was the end of the year. I sent out 372 resumes to try to get into the creative side of the movie industry. And this was before computers. I had to literally type out on my typewriter 372 cover letters. Oh, a typewriter was a box about this big. And if you're ever in a museum, you really should check it out. It's right next to the VCR. I got 2 responses, each one offering me $95 a week, one to work in a mailroom, one to go for coffee and Xerox. Plan B. Always have a plan B, a plan C, and if you can afford it, a plan D. Begrudgingly, I went to law school. I figured if I couldn't get in the door creatively, let me try to go to law school, take every course I could find on communications or entertainment, get a job in the movie industry on the legal business financial side, network like mad, learn everything I can as to how you finance and produce movies, and then when no one's looking, sneak in the back door. Plan B worked. I got out of school, I got a job as a motion picture production attorney for United Artists when it was a major studio. I was put in charge of all kinds of movies. I learned great stuff. I said I'm going to do this lawyer thing as if it's graduate school for no more than 4 years. At the end of that time, I'm going to quit. I will not be trapped for the rest of my life into being a lawyer. I will either be producing and writing movies, TV, and animation, or I'll be delivering pizza for Domino's, but I will not be trapped into being a lawyer. And about 3 years into it, I knew my time had come. I went back to the president of DC Comics and said, I want to buy the rights to Batman. I want to make these dark and serious movies to show the world what he's like. Nobody's ever seen a dark, serious comic book movie before. He said, Michael, for God's sake, please don't do this. Save your money. Since Batman went off the air on TV, he's been as dead as a dodo. Nobody's interested in Batman. I said, yeah, but if we do this dark, serious thing, it'll be a whole new thing. He goes, is there any way I can talk you out of this? I said, no. He said, all right, come on in. 6 months later, my partner and I raised privately the money we needed, and we bought the rights to Batman. I put it in my back pocket. I quit my job. I went to Hollywood because this was going to be a slam dunk. They were going to all line up at my doorstep. How could they not see the sequels, the animation, the toys and games? I was turned down by every single studio in Hollywood. Not just turned down. I was told I was crazy. I said, Michael, you can't make serious comic book films. You can't make dark superheroes, and for God's sake, nobody's ever made a movie based on an old television series that's never been done. What I thought would be a slam dunk from that moment turned into a 10-year human endurance contest for us to try to get the first Batman movie made. Let me tell you something, 10 years is a long time. So many times I had my back up against the wall. I didn't know where my next dollar was coming from. When everybody tells you you suck and your ideas stink, at some point in time you go, is everybody right? Am I wrong? Am I just being stubborn? Or do I so believe in myself? Do I so believe in my work that I can hold on by my fingertips and make this? Thanks to the genius of Tim Burton, our production designer Anton Furst, the first Batman movie came out. But this was only after all the rejections. From Columbia Pictures, I pitched my heart out. They said, Michael, come on. Batman will never succeed as a movie because our movie, Annie, didn't do well. I said, are you talking about the little red-headed girl who sings Tomorrow? He goes, yeah. I go, what does that have to do with Batman? He says, oh, come on, Michael. They're both out of the funny pages. At United Artists, the guy there said, Batman and Robin would never work as a movie because the movie Robin and Marion didn't do well. That was a movie with Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn as an aging Robin Hood and Maid Marion. It's Hollywood. It's unbelievable. The only nexus was the word Robin in the title. The movie comes out in 1989, breaks all kinds of box office records, a humongous success, impacting the culture worldwide, and about 2 weeks later, my phone rings. It's the Robin and Marion guy from 10 years ago. Michael, I'm just calling to congratulate you on the success of Batman. I always said you were a visionary. If you don't believe them when they tell you how bad you are and how terrible your work and ideas are, and then if you don't believe them when they start telling you how wonderful you are and how great your ideas are, you'll do just great. Believe in yourself, believe in your work. My father was a Mason, I told you. My dad had to drop out of high school at age 16 to help his family survive the Depression. My dad worked 6 days a week his whole life. It didn't matter if it was 95-degree New Jersey humidity or if it was snowing out, he would make a fire and keep going on the job. My dad worked until he was 80 years old, and then the only reason he stopped was my mom took sick and he had to take care of her. My father got up before dawn every day with a big smile on his face. He couldn't wait to get to work. He was an old world craftsman. He was an artist. You should see the fireplaces and the walls that he made with brick and stone and marble. My dad had this thing where he loved what he did and loved going to work. And when you grow up in a house like that, how can you not want that for yourself? So in the summers I would work for him and it was terrible. Tarring foundations in the heat, carrying bricks, carrying cement, and then I figured it out. I had to find my bricks and stones. And for me it was movies, it was comic books, and it was Batman. Recently, I spoke at Georgetown University, and during Q&A, a young lady got up and she said, Mr. Uslan, she goes, well, what exactly is your job? And I said, well, every day I report to a sandbox and I play with my favorite toys. That's what I do for a living. The only job I could find, I get to be 16 years old for the rest of my life. And in conclusion, as I've tried to explain to you, that sometimes you must have a very high threshold for frustration if you want to succeed. Sometimes you just got to get up off your ass, get up off the couch, not feel entitled to anything from anyone, and make something happen for yourself if you want your dreams to come true. If you have a passion like my dad had, like I have, about whatever it may be, it can make all the difference in the world. The one poem that has impacted my life the most, I'd like to leave you with one line. It's from Robert Frost, and it's The Road Not Taken. And I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I chose the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you very, very much.